Hello everyone, welcome back to the Going Zero Waste YouTube channel. I'm Catherine Kellogg, and with us today we have a very special guest.
I'm Shelbi, also known as Shelbizzle here on YouTube.
Today we are going over 15 things the zero waste movement gets wrong. I will be covering the first 7.5 or the second 7.5, depending on which order you're watching these videos, and Shelbi will have the other 7.5,
Yes. So
so you can go see them. The real question is, which point will we be splitting in half? You'll have to wait and find out. The first thing we want to talk about is only focusing on the end of life of a product. And this is something I definitely was very, very guilty of when I first started living a zero waste lifestyle. A very narrow view of focusing only on plastic, only on trash, and I've really grown my perspective a lot on that.
I think the zero waste movement really lends itself to only focusing on the end of a product's life cycle, whereas I think the movement has shifted more now to like holistic sustainability in terms of the environment and intersections as well.
I think it's a really, really good place to start, especially if you've never considered any sort of environmental perspective at all.
Yeah.
It's really an easy and accessible thing to focus on. I feel like it's also something that's very tangible. So I think it's a really, really good place to start, but it's kind of a bad place to stop. I mean, I think full life cycle analysis and carbon footprints of things still give both of us headaches sometimes.
Yeah. I love it, but also like, oh my, what do I do now? Often you're left with like, now what? You know?
Right. Which brings us to our next point, which is focusing on materials, specifically aluminum. So Shelbi and I recently took a trip to Target, and we found brands like Colgate and Gillette really bragging about the fact that they're now using aluminum. Like, they're really jazzed about it, and you can tell from the look on their products. Infinitely recyclable metal.
The symbols and the colors, they've got it all figured out. Yeah.
They're really, really leaning into the recyclability of aluminum.
Yeah.
And aluminum's great. Aluminum is really recyclable. But why aren't they using recycled materials in their own products?
Yeah. A lot of people think that aluminum is a better material because it's more recyclable, which is true. Like, I think like 75% of all aluminum ever created has been recycled, whereas only like 9% of plastics have been that way. But if we don't make the whole system more efficient by putting money into it and reusing the materials or recycling them, then what? You know what I mean? It doesn't really help.
And when we're looking at the full life cycle analysis, how do we get aluminum? We strip mine it. And for every 1 ton of aluminum, 1 ton of waste is produced. And we're going to throw up a few articles over here of ways that that's really not great for the environment. It's not great for groundwater. It's not great for local communities. It's not great for air pollution. And one of the red mud places where they keep this wastewater has killed multiple people. It's really not a great thing. So if we're not using 100% recycled material, and I think this goes across the board, 100% recycled material is always going to be the most eco-friendly option.
Because also if we're talking about recyclability of aluminum, right? We're creating it, recycling it, whatever. But there's still all that waste, like you said, per ton of aluminum. There's all this waste that we're not seeing. So while, yes, this is recyclable, if we're not actually using that material again, there's still all this waste you're producing. You know, regardless.
Oh, wow. This leads us straight to number 3, which is talking about PCR, post-consumer recycled content.
This is Catherine's favorite.
I love PCR. I think it's great because we definitely need more businesses propping up and supporting these industries. And there's actually a pretty big misconception. Recently, when you recycled plastic, it would be downcycled into plastic number 7, or it would be downcycled into something like polyester clothing or carpets. And that was the only way to recycle these materials. But there's been a lot that's changed. And now with plastic number 1, PET, and plastic number 2, you can actually keep that material as its pure self. So we're not having to downgrade it into a lower grade of plastic. We're actually able to keep the high quality plastics as still high quality plastic. It's actually a way of keeping it closed loop because they can keep recycling it through the same numbers. That's kind of a misconception that was true but has changed. So a lot of people still avoid PCR plastic because they think it can't be recycled again, but that's actually not entirely true.
Right. Yeah, I think it's also really important to point out that the real solution to sustainable living in general, but also when it comes to solid materials like we're talking about, is a circular economy, a circular system. And recycling can be that if we focus on actually recycling and reusing those materials. So really supporting recycled materials in products is the way, or one of the ways I should say, towards that circularity actually happening.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Up next, we have buying sustainably made. One of the really big things with that, obviously, we both support sustainable products, right? I mean, a lot of our brands and our channels are built around sustainable products and helping people make smarter decisions. And of course, we want to be supporting companies who are doing really good things in the world. But if we're exchanging a one-to-one consumer rate, it's not actually going to change anything. One of the major problems we really need to tackle is overconsumption. So you have to tackle your mindset, your overconsumption, and then buying sustainably is great. But when they compared sustainable shoppers to non-sustainable shoppers, their carbon emissions were still almost the exact same because it was just exchanging a one for one. So in order to make a really good, true impact, we really need to be buying less, shopping secondhand, and reusing what we have.
If you currently are a super hyper consumer, this is what I call it, and you shop a lot, you wear a lot of different clothes, you only rarely repeat an outfit, and you decide to live more sustainably, so you start purchasing those same amount of clothing, but now it's sustainable, the overall environmental footprint of that is not going to be much better, I think is the point here. Yes. You still have to reduce your consumption because the overall footprint of creating a new item is still not that sustainable. So the real answer here is consume less and shop secondhand as often as you can, also known as eco-minimalism over on my channel.
Ooh, yes. Once again, the problem really is over-consuming.
Yeah.
And if you can't afford to buy sustainable items, you probably aren't over-consuming. So you probably don't even fall into this category.
Right.
And let's say that you have exceptions. So for instance, for me, something that's really difficult for me to find are pants that fit my body. I know that a lot of people struggle with pants. Yeah. And sometimes I buy a not so sustainable brand because they fit my body. But how often am I buying jeans? Maybe once every 3 years, like once I blow the crotch out of them. So it takes a really long time for me to get to the point to need a new jean. So what I like to do is, since it typically is at a lower price point, I price out what would the sustainable brand be worth, and then what is the unsustainable brand worth. And then I take that cost difference and then I donate it to one of my favorite eco organizations in order to hopefully create positive change in a different way. And that's why it can't, like, the whole crux of the world and buying absolutely everything perfectly sustainable, like, it cannot fall on a few people to be making the right choices, which actually leads us to our next point, which is talking about how companies can create more sustainable change. And I think this was when we were at the Phoenix Open at the Sustainability Conference. Yeah. When we were there, they're talking about Pepsi is in more countries than the UN.
Right.
So if Pepsi were to make a substantial sustainability change, the ripple effects that would have across the industry would be so much larger than any individual can do.
Yeah, and a lot of people refer to this as greenwashing, right? When giant corporations do something sustainable, which, if their stance is that they are now a sustainable company because they made XYZ changes, sure. But a lot of them don't make those claims. A lot of them make these changes, which makes a giant impact overall because most consumers are consuming those brands, right? Most people are not buying super sustainable, small, locally made brands like maybe you and I are, but a lot of people support Pepsi. So when Pepsi makes a change, it has a really big ripple effect. Mm-hmm. Does that mean now, like, hardcore environmentalists, I guess you could say, are like,
yeah, Pepsi?
No. But we definitely appreciate the change and can acknowledge that they've made, like, a good decision, you know?
Like, I don't think either one of us are going to be heading to H&M and doing an H&M haul anytime soon.
Right.
But H&M is the world's largest global buyer of organic cotton. They are almost single-handedly really boosting the organic cotton industry. Does that mean I'm a huge H&M fan? No, but do I think that's pretty cool? Yeah, I think that's great. I think we should be seeing more
Right.
sustainable cotton. And if they're gonna support that, that's great. So it's kind of like, where is that greenwashing line?
So hard to say. I have a whole video that was literally, the question of the video is, where is the line? Like, who knows, you know? So
Right. So shaming other people on the internet for making a slightly different choice than you is just never a good move. Instead, take that energy
yeah.
and email a corporation, email your rep, go protest. Take the fear you feel for your fellow human and direct it somewhere else, because each of us is only doing the best we can, and as we've discussed, which is really unfortunate, everything is just a lot more complicated than it seems.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, wow. This is segueing so beautifully into our next, which has to do with everyone else, other people, how we view other people. And I know for me, maybe for you, let me know in the comments below, but did you feel like when you started living a more sustainable life, do you feel like you lost yourself? Do you feel like you tried to conform to what like an environmentalist should be?
That journey for me has gone like this.
Yes.
Yes, I always like, should I be wearing makeup as an environmentalist? Fuck it, I love it. And you know, it's just a lot of back and forth for sure.
Absolutely. So, when I first started, which if you saw my last video, which is Zero Waste Regrets, a lot of people were doing water-only hair care or using apple cider vinegar as
Yes,
toner.
the no poo era, for sure.
Yes, the no poo era. And my hair just looked really greasy.
Yeah.
And I just did not feel cute. And I made my whole wardrobe super minimalistic and everything was black and white.
Yeah.
I was just this sad, black and white, greasy human.
Oh, no, yeah.
And that doesn't make me happy. Like, why would anyone want to join the... No, I was like, I'm white. I wear white all the time.
And Shelby's wearing black. We could get together.
So now it's like, you know what? I love wearing blue. And you'll probably notice I wear blue all the time. I love wearing blue. I love wearing pastels and lavender, and I like doing my hair and I like doing my makeup, and I can do all that in a sustainable way. And we need you with your own style and your own passions and your own thing, right? You're into fashion, great, sustainable fashion. You're into soil, cool, like great. You love trees, fantastic. You love punk rock, great. Get into sustainable tech. We need everyone in every place. And you were telling me just like this fantastic story, because we get both comments of people really kind of really being down on what we do. And it's like, oh, well, how is that really making a difference? How is what you're doing really making a difference? And statistically, Jeff Bezos' space thing got just as much press coverage as the entire climate crisis did in all of 2020.
There's a chart for this, right?
Yes. So what we're saying is us talking about it and you talking about it and telling your friends and your family and posting on your social actually is a good thing.
Yeah. I was definitely telling Catherine this before, and it's like every time I get a comment that's like, well, if you really care, why aren't you doing this or that? And it's like, there are people doing those things. That doesn't mean that's where I am meant to be. And I think, again, I not to toot my own horn, but I think I'm pretty good at communicating. Mm-hmm. And I think that is also a very important part of solving the environmental crises we face. But like, if someone is better at being an advocate, or what do you call it, an activist, that's just not me with my social anxiety and my introvertedness, you know what I mean? So leave that to the people who love that, and let the people who are good at doing this, do this. And you, whatever you love, do that.
We're coming up on our final 2 points here, which we both have kind of discussed a little bit throughout this, which is the whole world does not lie on your shoulders. I mean, individual action is important. Of course it's important, because like, who do these 71 companies that are producing 100% of emissions, what are they doing? They're selling products that we are buying,
For
right?
sure, yeah.
So individual action is important, but it definitely was too focused, and there wasn't enough talk about political action, civic engagement, protesting, petitions. It wasn't focusing on the bigger picture yet.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, if you're just starting out, if you feel more inclined to get into civic action sooner, or if you think that you really needed to go through like the hardcore individual action phase first.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. What do you think?
I think everybody's experience is different, basically based on the last point we talked about, which is what you're good at. I think it's different, but for me personally, I think definitely like focusing on myself before I focused on like the bigger picture was needed for me.
Yeah, it absolutely was needed for me too. I needed more introspection time.
Yeah.
And I think that also maybe comes with me personally having a more artistic personality and needing time to like process and create and think in my own way.
Right.
But I know you're right. There are some people who are just ready to charge. Like they're just ready to go.
Yeah.
And if that's you, props, man.
We need you too.
Yes, we need you.
So do it.
We need everyone. Da-da-da! And now we get to the last point, which is talking about nuance and how nuance is really difficult to communicate in a 15-second reel or a 240 limited character tweet.
Yeah. I just think like from the beginning, the zero waste movement was like, this is good and that is bad and that is it. And it's just so not, but it's so hard to communicate that in a way that doesn't just make people throw their hands up and go,
well, then I can't do anything and I'm out.
I really like want to write that as a song. This is good and that is bad and that is that. This is good and that is bad and that is that. Happy. There's such limited space in order to convey a message concisely. Having all these ifs, ands, and buts included do tend to dilute the message. They don't make it shareable. They make it really difficult. Yeah. And I think you can maybe see how that's a really large problem in most of mainstream media.
Right.
Because it's very difficult to convey ifs, ands, and buts, especially when the livelihood of your platform depends on engagement.
And that's also why, going to our last point, this is not an easy thing to do. Having these conversations and making them approachable and sexy, if you will, this is what I like to say, it's not an easy job. I know often it looks easy, but it's absolutely not.
It can be really difficult to deal with the nuance. You know, like we were talking about life cycle analysis of aluminum, and it's so easy to say aluminum good, plastic bad.
That's exactly it.
But the fact is it goes a lot deeper than that.
Yeah.
And how can we do that without driving ourselves absolutely around in 100 circles? Because we're placing so much morality on these decisions, and especially because the morality of these decisions were often assigned to our personal beliefs and experiences. It creates a lot of emotion when you find out that what you believed was wrong, and then we tend to like repel against it because we created these and embedded them into our identities. Right? Plastic free living, right? That was embedded into an identity that many of us felt like we were a part of.
Right.
So when we started learning more information, we just kind of shoved it aside. And I think we have to remove the morality and we have to remove the identity of that and really just focus on doing the best we can and really shifting more to what we're talking about, you know, civic engagement and political action.
That's also what a lot of this comes down to when you really take this plastic-free living and then you start learning about life cycle analysis and the way the system works and all these things. You kind of come down to, well, it's really got to start at the top. Like, it's really got to go systemic change. And people don't like that for two reasons, I think. Well, actually 3 reasons. You mentioned the emotional problem, which I don't often think about. But also, our attention spans are so small these days. I mean, all of us, just with so much information always coming at us. And number 3, this society also loves instant gratification. And to be told, do this. Just do it this way. That's your solution. And off you go. But that's really just not what it comes down to anymore. So.
Right. I hope you don't feel exhausted after watching this video or confused because we're only halfway done. So the other half can be found over at Shelbi. And I kind of want to end this on a little bit more uplifting note. And I think the way I'd like to end it is with your world famous trademark quote.
Oh, thank you. Do you want me to say it?
Absolutely.
Okay. You cannot do all the good that the world needs, but the world needs all the good that you can do.
Yes, so if you please give this video a thumbs up, press that big red subscribe button to be notified when new videos are coming out, and I'll see you over on Shelbi.
We'll link it below.